in the air. There's magic everywhere. Springs in the air. There's magic everywhere.
I am Ralph Carter. Fortunately for me in my life, I had the opportunity to work on a television series entitled Good Times.
Don't gasp when you see what happened to Ralph Carter. The truth is darker than anyone imagined.
I do deserve to be punished. But tonight is special, JJ. I mean, you can ground me for a week, a month, a year, I don't care, but please.
At just 12 years old, Ralph Carter conquered Broadway and earned a Tony nomination. By 18, he was gone from Hollywood forever.
Honey, you never walked away from a test before. Tell us what's really bothering you.
Mama, they don't know it, but that IQ exam was nothing but a white racist.
Hollywood spread rumors about his sexuality from day one. A soft-spoken, intelligent black teenager didn't fit their idea of masculinity, so they destroyed him. This is how it all went down. Before Ralph Carter became Michael Evans on Good Times, he was already making history on the stages of Broadway as one of the youngest performers ever to earn critical acclaim in professional theater. At just 12 years old, he was commanding audiences in Raisin, the musical adaptation of Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun, delivering performances that left seasoned theater critics scrambling for superlatives to describe what they were witnessing. The year was 1973, and Ralph was playing Travis Younger, the young son whose dreams and innocence represented hope in the face of crushing poverty and systemic racism. His portrayal wasn't the typical child actor performance filled with manufactured cuteness and rehearsed charm. Instead, Ralph brought a maturity and emotional depth that seemed impossible for someone his age, understanding the weight of the material and delivering it with the precision of a seasoned professional.
While I was doing the Karl Marx play, my manager at the time, Miss Selma Rubin, was negotiating for me to do Lorraine Hansberry's classic work, A Raisin in the Sun. It had been turned into a musical. Ernestine Jackson played my mother. Debbie Allen played my auntie. You had wonderful talents like Joe Morton. Our star was Virginia Capers, along with Helen Martin.
Broadway insiders were stunned by his natural ability to handle complex, dramatic material. During rehearsals, directors noticed that Ralph didn't just memorize his lines. He understood them, questioned them, and found ways to make them more authentic. His approach to the craft was unusually sophisticated for a child, displaying the kind of artistic integrity that typically develops only after years of experience and training. The critics responded with the kind of praise that can make or break careers. Ralph earned a Drama Desk Award and a Tony nomination, achievements that placed him in rare company among performers of any age. These weren't participation trophies or encouraging pats on the head for a promising youngster. They were genuine recognition of exceptional talent that happened to exist in a very young package. But even as Ralph was earning accolades on Broadway, the entertainment industry was beginning to take notice of him for a very different kind of project. Television producers were developing a groundbreaking sitcom that would tackle issues of poverty, racism, and social justice through the lens of a working-class black family in Chicago. They needed someone who could handle heavy material while still appealing to mainstream audiences, someone who could be both entertaining and socially conscious. The character of Michael Evans was conceived as the moral center of Good Times, the youngest member of the Evans family who would serve as both comic relief and political conscience. Writers envisioned him as a militant child prodigy, someone who would challenge authority, question injustice, and represent the kind of social awareness that was emerging in black communities during the civil rights era.
The moon at night seems to shine twice as bright when you're...
Ralph's Broadway experience made him an obvious choice for the role, but his casting also represented something larger about what the show was trying to accomplish. The producers weren't looking for a typical child actor who could deliver cute lines and get laughs from studio audiences. They wanted someone who could handle the weight of being a spokesperson for an entire generation of young Black Americans who were growing up aware of the struggles their parents had faced and determined to create something better for themselves. The transition from Broadway to television should have been the beginning of a long and successful career for someone with Ralph's talent and recognition. He had proven himself on the most demanding stage in American theater, earned the respect of critics and industry professionals, and was now positioned to reach millions of viewers through one of the most socially relevant shows on television. Everything seemed to be aligning perfectly for a young performer who had already accomplished more than most actors achieve in entire careers. The rumors about Ralph Carter's sexuality started almost immediately after Good Times premiered. Born not from any evidence or personal revelation, but from the cruel mathematics of public perception applied to a young black performer who didn't fit into society's narrow definitions of masculinity. His soft-spoken demeanor, his intellectual approach to his craft, and his gentle presence on screen became twisted into something sinister by audiences who couldn't separate the person from their prejudices. The speculation was particularly vicious because it targeted a child who had no way to defend himself against accusations that shouldn't have mattered in the first place. Ralph was barely a teenager when viewers began analyzing his voice, his gestures, and his clothing choices for supposed clues about his private life. The tight-fitting clothes that Michael Evans wore on Good Times became evidence in the minds of people who refused to acknowledge that costume departments, not actors, chose wardrobe for television shows.
Why'd y'all cut it out? I am in love.
What made the rumors especially insidious was how they spread through the informal networks of gossip that connected Hollywood insiders, fan communities, and entertainment journalists. Ralph's family life and personal relationships contradicted every aspect of the speculation, but facts rarely matter when rumors serve people's psychological needs. His later marriages to women, his children, and his consistent pattern of heterosexual relationships never fully dispelled the whispers because the people spreading them weren't interested in accuracy. They were interested in control. The persistence of these rumors revealed something disturbing about how American society treated young black men who displayed intelligence, sensitivity, or any characteristics that didn't conform to rigid stereotypes about masculinity. Ralph was being punished not for anything he had done, but for refusing to perform the kind of hyper-masculine persona that made white audiences comfortable with black male performers. The psychological toll of these constant whispers on a young person trying to navigate the already challenging world of professional entertainment was enormous. Ralph was forced to be aware of how every gesture, every word, every public appearance might be interpreted and weaponized against him by people who had already decided who he was based on their own prejudices rather than his actual behavior. When Ralph Carter joined the cast of Good Times in 1974, he wasn't just taking on another acting role. He was becoming the voice of a generation of young black Americans who were tired of seeing themselves represented only as victims or comic relief on television. The character of Michael Evans was revolutionary for its time, a child who wasn't afraid to challenge adults, question authority, or speak directly about racism and social injustice in ways that made both black and white audiences uncomfortable.
Honey, you never walked away from a test before. Tell us what's really bothering you.
Mama, they don't know it, but that IQ exam was nothing but a white racist.
The show's creator, Eric Monti, had drawn inspiration from his own experiences growing up in Chicago's Cabrini Green housing projects, and he wanted Michael Evans to represent the kind of politically aware young person who was emerging from these communities, someone who read voraciously, understood the connections between personal struggles and systemic oppression, and wasn't willing to accept the status quo simply because adults told him that's how things were.
So I wrote the script, the pilot script for what's happening, turned it in to ABC, they accepted it.
Ralph brought something special to this character that went beyond the written words on the page. His Broadway training had taught him how to find the emotional truth in complex material, and his natural intelligence allowed him to understand the political implications of what he was saying. When Michael Evans delivered speeches about Black pride or challenged his parents' acceptance of poverty, Ralph wasn't just reciting lines. He was channeling genuine conviction that made every word feel authentic. The impact was immediate and powerful. Young Black viewers saw themselves reflected in Michael Evans in ways they had never experienced on television before. Here was a character who looked like them, sounded like them, and expressed the same frustrations and aspirations they felt, but had never heard articulated on mainstream media. Michael wasn't just the smart kid or the funny kid. He was the kid who refused to be silenced or diminished by the circumstances of his birth. But Ralph's commitment to authenticity in the role also created tensions behind the scenes that would ultimately contribute to his eventual departure from the industry. As Good Times became more popular and mainstream, network executives began pressuring the writers to tone down the political content and focus more on the comedic elements that were drawing larger audiences. They wanted more of JJ's "Dino-mite" catchphrase and less of Michael's speeches about social justice.
Aren't you glad you let your fingers do the walking? Cause you got kids dynamite!
Ralph reportedly began questioning these changes, asking writers and producers why they were moving away from the social consciousness that had made the show groundbreaking in the first place. His Broadway background had taught him to respect the integrity of the material, and he couldn't understand why success meant compromising the very elements that had made the show meaningful to its core audience. The tension came to a head when Ralph allegedly began suggesting changes to scripts that he felt were turning Michael Evans into a one-dimensional character. He wanted to explore the psychological complexity of a young person growing up in poverty while maintaining hope and political awareness. He pushed for storylines that would show Michael dealing with the real challenges facing young Black men in America, not just serving as comic relief or delivering simplified moral lessons.
You're not old enough to move out on your own.
Mama, I'm 17 years.
This kind of creative input from a teenage actor was unprecedented in television at the time. Most young performers were expected to show up, say their lines, and be grateful for the opportunity. But Ralph had come from Broadway, where actors were expected to contribute to the creative process and where artistic integrity was valued above commercial considerations. He didn't understand why television should be any different. The conflicts escalated when Ralph began speaking directly to writers about how certain storylines reinforced negative stereotypes about Black families. He wasn't being disrespectful or difficult. He was simply applying the same analytical approach to his television work that had made him successful on Broadway. But in Hollywood, this kind of intellectual engagement from a young Black actor was seen as problematic rather than valuable. As Good Times continued its run, Ralph Carter's reputation behind the scenes began to shift from talented young actor to difficult to work with, a label that has destroyed more careers in Hollywood than any scandal or personal failure. The change didn't happen because Ralph was unprofessional or demanding in the traditional sense. Instead, it happened because he refused to stay silent when he saw his character and the show moving in directions that contradicted the social consciousness that had originally made them powerful. The transformation of Good Times from groundbreaking social commentary to mainstream sitcom was happening gradually, but Ralph could see where things were heading. Network executives were pushing for more broad comedy and less political content, wanting to capitalize on the show's popularity without maintaining the elements that might make white audiences uncomfortable. They wanted the Evans family to be lovable and non-threatening, not challenging and revolutionary.
Buddy, I will be sleeping on the couch in the living room. It's perfect. The apartment is walking distance.
Ralph's resistance to these changes put him at odds with powerful people who weren't accustomed to having their decisions questioned by teenage actors. when he suggested that certain storylines were undermining the dignity of the characters or reinforcing harmful stereotypes. He was told that his job was to act, not to analyze or critique. When he asked why Michael Evans was being given fewer meaningful speeches and more comic relief moments, he was reminded that comedy sold better than social commentary. The situation became more complicated when Ralph began aligning himself with Esther Rolle, who played his mother, Florida Evans, and who had her own conflicts with the show's direction.
Michael, I'm sorry I hit you. You know I love you too.
I know, Ma.
Rolle was a veteran actress who had come from serious dramatic work and who shared Ralph's concerns about how the show was evolving. She had her own battles with producers about storylines she felt were demeaning to Black women and families, and she appreciated having someone else on the cast who understood the larger implications of what they were creating. But while Rolle had the power and experience to fight back against the network's demands, she eventually left the show for an entire season in protest. Ralph was in a much more vulnerable position. He was young, Black, and relatively new to television, which meant that his complaints were more likely to be seen as ingratitude rather than legitimate artistic concerns. The very qualities that made him valuable as an actor, his intelligence, his political awareness, his commitment to authenticity, were now being used against him as evidence that he was difficult to manage. The irony was that the very qualities that made Ralph Carter valuable as Michael Evans, his intelligence, his political awareness, his refusal to compromise his principles, were the same qualities that made him unmarketable as a Hollywood actor. The industry wanted performers who could convincingly portray social consciousness on screen while remaining safely controllable off-screen. Ralph's authenticity made him perfect for the role, but dangerous for the business. When Good Times ended its run in 1979, Ralph Carter was 18 years old and positioned to become one of the most promising young actors in Hollywood.
Hi, everybody. How was your day?
It was just fine, Michael. How was yours?
He had television experience, Broadway credentials, and name recognition that most performers spend decades trying to achieve. For any other young actor with his background and talent, this should have been the moment when doors began opening to bigger and better opportunities. Instead, it marked the beginning of Ralph's mysterious disappearance from the entertainment industry. The silence was immediate and complete. No movie offers materialized. No television pilots came his way. No casting directors reached out with opportunities for someone with his proven track record. It was as if Ralph Carter had simply ceased to exist in the minds of the people who controlled access to roles and projects in Hollywood. The phone calls that should have been flooding his agent's office never came. The few opportunities that did emerge were small, insignificant projects that wouldn't have challenged Ralph's abilities or restored his visibility in the industry. These token offers seemed designed more to provide plausible deniability for claims that he was being blacklisted than to actually advance his career. Ralph recognized them for what they were and chose not to participate in his own marginalization.
What the hell is your big hurry?
One of my heroes' Christmas addicts wasn't afraid when his turn came.
As months turned into years without meaningful opportunities, it became clear that Ralph's career in mainstream entertainment was effectively over. The industry had made its decision about his value and his future, and no amount of talent or previous success was going to change that calculation. The boy who had conquered Broadway and television had been defeated by forces that operated in shadows and denied their own existence. Ralph's response to this systematic exclusion revealed the strength of character that had made him valuable as an actor and dangerous as an industry participant. Instead of desperately chasing diminishing opportunities or compromising his principles to regain access, he chose dignity over desperation and began building a life that didn't depend on Hollywood's approval or acceptance. While Hollywood gossiped and speculated about Ralph Carter's disappearance, the man himself was building something that proved more valuable and lasting than fame. A family, a community, and a life defined by his own values rather than industry expectations. The decision to step away from entertainment wasn't the tragedy that many assumed it to be, but rather a conscious choice to pursue happiness and fulfillment on terms that the entertainment industry couldn't understand or control. In February 1987, Ralph married Lisa Parks in a ceremony that was private and personal rather than public and promotional. The marriage represented a clear signal that Ralph was committed to living his life away from the spotlight, choosing authentic relationships over the manufactured connections that defined most of Hollywood's social structure. The couple's two sons were born into a world where their father's identity wasn't tied to his celebrity status, but to his role as a husband and parent. Ralph's approach to fatherhood reflected the same thoughtfulness and integrity that had characterized his approach to acting. He was present, engaged, and committed to providing his children with the kind of stable, loving environment that many child stars never experience.
I do deserve to be punished. But tonight is special, JJ. I mean, you can ground me for a week, a month, a year. I don't care, but please.
When Ralph's first marriage ended in divorce in 1992, he handled the transition with the same privacy and dignity that had marked his departure from Hollywood. There were no public battles, no tabloid stories, no attempts to use personal drama to resurrect his career. Instead, he focused on maintaining his relationships with his sons and continuing to build the kind of life that brought him satisfaction and peace. His second marriage to River York in December 1994 brought 3 more children into Ralph's life, creating a household that was busy, chaotic, and filled with the kind of genuine joy that money and fame can't purchase.
Why'd y'all cut it out? I am in love.
Ralph's 5 children grew up in an environment where their father's former celebrity was acknowledged but not celebrated, where his decision to leave Hollywood was presented as a victory rather than a defeat. They learned that success could be measured in terms of personal satisfaction and family relationships rather than public recognition or financial achievement. The lessons Ralph taught them through his example were more valuable than any role he might have played in Hollywood. The life Ralph built after leaving Hollywood proved that the entertainment industry's definition of success was limited and ultimately unsatisfying for someone who valued authenticity over recognition. His children, his marriages, his community involvement, and his personal growth represented achievements that were more substantial and lasting than any television show or movie role could have provided. Today, Ralph Carter stands as something Hollywood never intended to create, a former child star who escaped the industry's destructive machinery and built a life of genuine contentment and purpose. His story challenges every assumption about what constitutes success in entertainment and proves that sometimes the greatest victory is walking away from a game that was never designed for you to win. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.